I asked for the remote, not a relay baton. Relay races have long been a staple of the Olympics, and the IOC has been adding several of them recently, including for the triathlon, which is the ultimate multi-sport test of swimming, cycling, and running. Well, what if we put the best of each of those disciplines into a single relay? We'll make it happen next. Welcome to the SportsZu. Zoo Crew, today we introduce the concept of an Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay. We're taking the best swimmers, the best runners, and the best cyclists, and we're putting them into one relay race with the triathlon team. So, how are we going to do that? Well, we'll need to break that down later, but first, let's start with the history of relay races in the Olympics. The very first relay race was at the 1904 Summer Olympic Games, where we had the first men's 4x50 yard freestyle swim relay, which was then replaced the very next Olympics with the traditional men's 4x200 meter freestyle. Then, just 4 years later, in 1912, we had the women make their debut with a 4x100 meter freestyle. Then, several years later, all the way in 1960, the men's and women's had the 4x100 meter medley relays debut. Now, of course, the medley relay is the backstroke, the breaststroke, the butterfly, and the freestyle, with each leg of the race being a different stroke. Then, in 1996, we finally had the first time when both the men and the women participated in all three standard relay races in swimming. Then in 2020, we finally got a mixed 4x100 medley relay. Then when we go to the track, the very first relay race was in 1908. There was a men's medley relay where the first two runners ran 200 meters, the third runner ran 400 meters, and then the final runner ran 800 meters. And instead of batons, the runners simply changed legs by touching hands. And this was known as the sprint medley relay. However, it was quickly replaced at the very next Olympics in 1912, which was the first time that the 4x100 meter relay and the 4x400 meter relay were held. Then in 1928, it was the first time that women were included, and they had a 4x100 meter relay. Several years later, in 1972, we had the first time with the women participating in a 4x400 meter relay, and in 2020, we again had a brand new mixed relay of a 4x400 meter relay. So we do have a few other Summer Olympic sports that have relay races, including the Madison, which debuted in 2000 for the men, and we also had the triathlon mixed relay in 2020. On the Winter Olympics side, cross-country skiing debuted in 1936 with a men's relay, and then the women's 10K and relay were added in 1956. The biathlon added a men's relay race in 1968, while the women finally added it in 1992. For short track speed skating, it had a women's 3,000 meter relay and a men's 5,000 meter relay included in every single Olympics in which there was short track speed skating, which began in 1992. And finally, a luge mixed relay began in 2014. So let's talk about the specific relays that are held at the Olympics. First for the Summer Olympics, and the ones that everyone is familiar with. First for swimming, there is the 4x100 meter freestyle for both men and women, the 4x200 meter freestyle for both men and women, and a 4x100 meter medley, which now has a men's, a women's, and a mixed relay. And again, the mixed relay just debuted in 2020. For athletics, which is track and field, so anytime we refer to athletics, that's track and field. So for athletics, we have a 4x100 meter which is for both men and women. And we have the 4x400 meter relay, which is for men, women, and the mixed, which debuted in 2020. As we noted earlier, the other Olympic relays at the Summer Olympics, triathlon just debuted its mixed relay in 2020, and also the Madison is a tag team points race where each cyclist tags in and out whenever they feel like it until the race ends. So that is held for both men and women, and this race returned for the first time in 2008, and it now includes a women's race, as it originally debuted for men only. For Winter Olympics, our relays are first the biathlon, which is a 4x7.5 kilometer race for men, 4x6 kilometer race for women, and we have a 2x6 kilometer for women plus 2x7.5 kilometer for men in the mixed relay. For cross-country skiing, we have a 4x10 kilometer relay for the men and a 4x5 kilometer relay for the women. We also have a luge team relay, which includes one woman, one man, and a doubles team, which was previously listed as an open, but every single participant in the doubles were 2 men. Now that's a little different of a relay, as you just don't keep going along one track and make a loop. You actually make a tag at the bottom of each luger's run, and immediately the next person restarts at the top. So that is a continuous relay. Lastly, we have the short track speed skating relays. We have a 5,000 meter for the men, a 3,000 meter for the women, and a 2,000 meter for mixed. Now, you've never seen such chaos on a single sheet of ice as when you get a final of a short track speed skating that has 5 teams all going for the gold. There are just so many moving parts, so many people skating around at all times, it's really hard to keep track. Now, we do have a couple what I would call non-continuous relays at the Winter Olympics. First, your traditional Nordic combined team relay. For men, you have large hill ski jumping, then followed by 4x5 kilometer cross-country skiing. Now, since ski jumping is just scored by points, it obviously wouldn't make sense for everyone to just all jump at the same time and then just start cross-country skiing. Instead, you get your points for the ski jumping, and then you start individually each team for the cross-country skiing, with one team having a lead among the others. They each have a staggered start depending on how well they did in the ski jumping aspect. Lastly, somewhat similarly for the snowboard cross team relay, which is a mixed team relay, again, you have a non-continuous start. It's almost continuous. You have one skier start, and then their time gives the second skier a little bit of an advantage in the second group. But this is very often just a very short advantage in this case, but it's not held continuously like the luge is. It would be great if you just automatically started up as soon as the person at the bottom started. I think they could go to that. They just need a good sensor to keep track of it. I really think that technology should come very soon, and it would improve this relay just a little bit. It's a really cool relay, but I think it would be improved a little bit if they could make it a continuous relay like the luge. We will have a new relay for Paris 2024, which will be the marathon walk relay, and it is a mixed relay. Now, surprisingly, there are only 2 participants in this relay team, and they do go back and forth a couple times. You start with the male, and he will have an 11.45 kilometer start. Then the female will have a 10 kilometer leg, followed by the male having a 10 kilometer leg, with the female ending it with a 10.745 kilometer leg, which gets you the full 42.195 marathon length relay. So this is slightly longer than the individual 20 kilometer walk for each gender, and it replaces the men's only 50 kilometer walk. And we will also have a new relay for Milano Cortina 2026, which is our next Winter Olympics. And this will be the ski mountaineering relay. So ski mountaineering is a really difficult sport if I've ever seen one. This involves each participant climbing up the mountain with their skis on and then turning around and skiing back down the mountain. Very difficult. I would encourage anyone to watch this. You've really got to be in amazing shape to be able to get up that mountain with your skis on. So I think that'll be a great sport. It will also debut as just a standard event as well for men and women, but the mixed will be coming in as well. So I also want to talk about Luge again. We need an update to this relay for 2026. So as I said, the Luge team relay currently starts with a women's leg, followed immediately by a men's leg, and then lastly a doubles leg. Now, as I said, doubles was an open category at the Olympics, but every single doubles team was a male team. However, this year, instead of having just one doubles event that is open to anyone, we will now have a men's doubles and a women's doubles. So this will be two new events replacing one event. So that's one more set of medals that will be handed out. However, the team relay, as of when I just looked at it for this project, is still listed as only 3 legs. So I assume the women's doubles teams are going to get left out of this. So simple fix here, let's add a 4th leg to this race. Simply have the women's leg, followed by the men's leg, followed by the women's doubles, and ended with the men's doubles. Easy, great, more medals to hand out, better race, it'll be a lot of fun. Let's make that very, very easy change, folks. So lastly, I wanted to note this that I wasn't even familiar with, but could the sliding sports be held in Lake Placid in 2026? That's pretty far from Italy, right? Well, apparently they do not have a venue that is currently up to Olympic standards, so they're trying to get that completed in time for 2026. But if they can, the US has approached them to say, we'll take these sliding sports, luge, bobsled, skeleton. That would be a lot of fun to have a few little events here for the Olympics, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. There are a few other capable Olympic-sized venues for these sliding sports in Europe that are not particularly far away. They are in other countries, but they're close. I don't know why they wouldn't go to those over Lake Placid, but hey, if we can get some US events here, I think that would be great. But hey, this is a video specifically about triathlon, so let's talk about the history of the Olympic triathlon. There's not a lot to say about it. It just debuted recently at the 2000 Sydney Olympics. And there was both a men's individual event and a women's individual event. Now, the Olympic triathlon is what is either called the International Triathlon or Standard Triathlon. And like we said, the mixed relay was just added at the last Olympics in 2020. Now, all time, Great Britain leads with 3 gold medals and 8 total medals. And as for the US, we have 1 gold medal, which was in 2016 at Rio by Gwen Jorgensen, and we have 4 total medals in the triathlon. So what is the Olympic triathlon? Well, it is the ultimate multi-sport event where you test swimming, biking, and running. So we have 3 different legs to every triathlon. First is swimming, which is 1.5 kilometers or 0.93 miles for everyone in the US. Then we have the cycling leg, which is 40 kilometers or 25 miles. And then we end with a run of 10 kilometers or 6.2 miles. Now for the mixed relay that was just added, it is a lot shorter than the standard Olympic triathlon. We have teams of 4 with 2 men and 2 women, and we keep the traditional swim, bike, run stages going, but the lengths, like I said, much shorter. The swim is 300 meters, the cycle is 6.8 kilometers, and the run is just 2 kilometers for each participant. But triathlon is just one of several multi-sport disciplines, and they're all amazing in their own right, so I want to bring that up right here before we get too far into things. So, in addition to the triathlon, we also have the duathlon that replaces the swim with a second run stage. We have the aquathlon, which replaces the bike with an extra run stage. We have the aqua bike, which gets rid of running completely, and we just have a swim and bike. We have the off-road triathlon, which replaces your standard biking and running with mountain biking and trail running, as well as a gravel counterpart that has a little gentler and or wider trails. We have the amazing winter triathlon. Look at that picture there. Wow. It has running, then mountain biking, and then cross-country skiing as the final leg. And there also are some alternate formats, and the ones that were pointed out on the USAT site were paddleboarding and canoeing, specifically replacing the swimming stage. So, let's talk about triathlon distances. This is kind of important here for what we're doing in setting up a relay. So the standard Olympic one right in the middle of our chart here, you can see it there. It has 51.5 total kilometers. And then at the far left, we have the mixed relay, which we talked about, definitely the shortest of all of them, only 9.1 total kilometers per competitors. So just a walk on the beach for each of them that day, right? In addition, we have several other pretty standard lengths of triathlons, including the super sprint, which is 12.9 total kilometers, the sprint, which we'll talk about later, being 25.75 kilometers, the World Triathlon Long, which is twice as long as the Olympic one at 102 kilometers. Then we have the two that are known as your Ironman events. So first we have your half iron or your 70.3, which has 70.3 miles. Then we have your full or long iron, which is amazing at 140.6 total miles. Nothing like ending an entire triathlon with a complete marathon run. So how are we going to get to an inter-sport relay? Well, let's break it down by category. First, we have swimming. So you can look at all of the standard distances here. First, we have our standard triathlons. I've added the sprint triathlon here on purpose. Then in bold, you can see the freestyle lengths that are competed individually at the Olympics. And those range from as little as 50 meters all the way up to 1,500 meters, which happens to be the same length as the Olympic triathlon. Then, and of course, all of those are done in the pool. But we also have one open water marathon, which is a 10-kilometer race, which obviously is much longer than your Olympic triathlon. Then the next stage is biking. So you can see here, we've broken it down again. We have our sprint triathlon is just a mere 20 kilometers, and the Olympic triathlon is twice as long at 40 kilometers. But in bold here, you can see we have our mountain biking cross-country race, which I can't really say what the distance is because that is not known until the day before the race. They determine the number of laps that they do in this particular race just one day before the event. Not exactly sure how that works. I guess it depends on the temperature and other conditions in the air to know just how far the participants should be going to have a full race. But for reference, in 2020, we had the 28.25 kilometer men's mountain biking cross country, and then a 20.55 kilometer race for the women. Also outside, we have the road cycling time trial, which will be 32.4 kilometers in 2024. It obviously can shift a little bit in distance depending on the particular track that is set up for the Olympics. Then lastly, we have the road cycling road race, which is the granddaddy of them all with how far that one is. For the men's, it will be 273 kilometers, and for the women, it will be 158 kilometers. In comparison, that's even significantly longer than what we saw in 2020 when it was 234 kilometers for the men and 137 kilometers for the women. But let's go inside to track cycling. Now, there are several indoor track cycling events, but most of them are pretty short races or team races, so we're going to just leave those be for now. The one we really want to focus on here is the Omnium. It has 55 kilometers total raced by each individual, and it takes place in 4 parts. So stages 1, 2, and 3, scratch, tempo, and elimination, are 10 kilometers each. Now in the elimination, as soon as you get eliminated, you don't keep riding, so unless you're first or second place in the elimination race, you're going to be traveling a lot less than 10 kilometers, but for our purposes, the full stage is 10 kilometers. Then lastly, there's a points race. It's the longest of the 4. It's 25 kilometers, But note that this takes place in one day. So even though there are 4 different stages, there's very little rest in between, about an hour between each stage total. So this is done in one day, 55 total kilometers in one day to get your gold medalist. Then let's go to the run stage. We have our sprint triathlon at 5 kilometers and the Olympic triathlon at 10 kilometers. First, let's start with the track races. They start at a minimum of 100 meters and go all the way up to 10,000 meters. Now, one would say that is a 10K, but to differentiate between the track races and a road race, they call the track version a 10,000 meter. But let's note here, for our purposes, the sprint triathlon is 5 kilometers and the 1,000 meter race for track is going to be important for us. So those are the 2 long ones, 5,000 meters and 10,000 meters on the track. But of course, we have the traditional road marathon as well. It is 42.195 kilometers, or your 26.2 miles for those in the US. So let's stop here for just a moment. Why did we go through all that? Well, we want to create this Inter-Sport Relay that we briefly talked about. So we need to gauge what kind of athlete we want to handle each leg of the race. So what we're going to propose is the sprint triathlon length, which is obviously further than the mixed relay length for the triathlon that was added in 2020, but still much shorter than the Olympic marathon. Nonetheless, what this will do for us is have all of the pretty long distance swimmers, cyclists, and runners being the best for these events. So we'll put that together here shortly. But first, we need to try to fit this relay into the schedule. So let's talk about the Olympic schedule. It's always pretty much the same, starting on a Friday with the opening ceremonies and ending on the 3rd Sunday following that opening ceremony. So it's 16 total days. This year, the opening ceremonies are on July 26th. But note that 4 sports have events before the opening ceremonies just due to the number of games or matches or events that need to be held in order to get to the gold medal matches by the end of the Olympics. Then the events take place across the next 16 days, starting on July 27th and then ending on Sunday, August 11th. Note that there are no events scheduled on the day of the opening ceremonies on July 26th. Lastly, the closing ceremonies take place on that last Sunday, which is August 11th in 2024. So for each sport, let's talk about the schedule. First, the triathlon, that's our primary sport here. So on July 30th, we have the men's individual race. The next day, on the 31st, we have the women's individual race. Then just 4 or 5 days later, we have the mixed relay. So I wanted to know, in watching that mixed relay over, the commentators really noted how these athletes are truly spectacular to be doing this just 4 or 5 days after their individual race. So very impressive for these triathletes. For swimming, it's a very full schedule. It starts on July 29th with the 800 meter for the men's and runs in the pool through August 4th for the 1500 meter for the men's. So we're only focusing on the 800 meter and the 1500 meter here, as these are the longer events where we probably would be pooling the participants in our Inter-Sport Relay from. Then at the very end of the Olympics on the 8th and 9th of August, remember closing ceremonies are the 11th, so pretty close to the end. On the 8th and 9th, we do have the open water 10-kilometer marathon for the women first, then the men the following day. Next, for cycling, it starts way at the beginning as well, the very first day of official competition. On the 27th, we have the road time trial for both the men and the women that day, followed by the mountain biking cross country for the women and men on the 28th and 29th. Now again, I want to note, I don't think the mountain bikers would be really good choices. It's a lot different to be a mountain biker than a road biker, right? So these cyclists, we're going to leave them eligible, but I don't think they'll participate. Then on the 3rd and 4th, we continue with the road, and we have the long road race for the men and the women on the 3rd and 4th. So that concludes the road schedule. Then we switch to the track, and for our purposes, On the 8th, we have the men's Omnium, and on the 11th, the day of the closing ceremonies, we finally have the women's Omnium. Lastly, for running, we go first to the track, and on August 2nd, we have the 10,000 meter men's run, and that runs all the way through the 9th with the 10,000 meter women's run. Now, I've also noted here, we have the 1,500 and the 5,000 meter runs as well. These could also be participants for our Inter-Sport Relay. Lastly, we have the road marathon. Those take place on the last 2 days. And I want to note here that the road marathon event is now, as of 2020, traditionally, according to Wikipedia, I don't know if that's much of a tradition, but I guess that's what they're going to do going forward, that the road marathon will be the final event of the Olympics prior to the closing ceremonies. So let's put it all together. Here's our composite schedule, similar to what we did for soccer a couple weeks ago, but here we are. So in red, we have the opening ceremonies, the closing ceremonies, and the triathlons. Then in blue, we have all of the swimming events. In black, we have the cycling events. And lastly, in green, we have the running events. So there we have it. You can see they're spread out pretty well with more towards the end of the schedule. So one of the things we always want to concern ourselves with is the health and safety of the Olympians. So I wanted to take a look at athletes who participated in multiple events. So for swimming, I did this only for the men, but we actually had 3 men participate in the open water marathon, and before that, participate in at least 1 pool event. So, and in fact, these gentlemen were pretty good, at least 2 of them. Florian Wellbrook of Germany won the gold in the open water marathon and the bronze in the 1500 in the pool. Then Gregorio Poltrineri, I should be better at speaking Italian, but I am not. He won the silver in the 800 and then won the bronze in the open water marathon. And in fact, he also got 4th place in the 1500. So clearly, participating in the marathon in open waters does not prevent you from also swimming in the pool. Very important for today's purposes. We also had 1 other participant amazingly participate in the open water 10 kilometer, then also be in the 800 meter, and then even the 400 meter. Quite a difference from 400 meters to a 10K open water event. Wow. And of course, we know that many swimmers participate in several different lengths of events in the pool. So here I noted several of them. We had 12 participate in both the 1500 and the 800. So pretty easy to do a couple long events. We had 6 more participate in the 1500, 800, and 400. Well, one of them did not start the 1500. He didn't quite make it to that one, but you can see the one gentleman also participated in the 1500, the 400, the 200, and the 4x200 meter relay. So a lot going on here. A lot of people do a lot of events. I want to note here at the bottom, we had 23 of the 29 men in the 1500 compete in another event, and 30 of 34 men in the 800 competed in another event. So there's just a lot of overlap here. It's not that hard. I'm really not very concerned for swimmers in keeping their health and safety. Granted, if these indoor pool swimmers are going to outdoor swimming for an inter-sport event, maybe there's some risk to them, but it seems to be minimal. I assume they can handle a little bit of choppy waters one time for a sprint race of 750 meters. I have to imagine they've swam outdoors before in some sort of condition, so I think they can handle it one time, but we'll get back to that later. Then for cycling, now we have a ton of overlap for the outdoor road races. We of course first have the time trial, then we have the full road race, and those are separated by a week, so it's a lot of time to recover. 39 men and 10 women participated in both of these events. Now for indoor track events, much less often this happens. The Omnium is just a lot different than the other events. Like I said, it's a far longer race, so it makes sense that those in the Omnium would mostly only participate in the one event. But we did have 3 men do that and 2 women do that, and they all participated in either the Kieran or the Madison. Then for running, I only looked at men again here because there are a lot of runners, obviously. So we had 1 male participate in both the road marathon and the 10,000 meter, which again is a 10K, on the track. So it's doable. It doesn't happen often, but we did have the 1 male do that. But we also had 9 males participate in both the 10,000 meter and the 5,000 meter track events. And again, we had 1 male not able to start that race due to not doing well in the 10,000 meter. And surprisingly, we had 1 male participate in the 5,000 meter as well as the 3,000 meter steeplechase. I certainly did not see a steeplechase runner also participating in a standard track event, but good for that guy for being able to participate in both of them. So again, there's not a lot of overlap, but we do see it from time to time. So I think here for running, we could certainly see that these individuals would be able to do more than 1 event. Granted, going from a track to the road is a little different, but come on, we know runners run on streets and sidewalks all of the time. I'm sure they can handle it when we have nearly pristine situations for the road races at the Olympics. So as a summary to this, swimming again, majority of the distance swimmers participate in 2+ Olympic events with minimal rest in between, so not worried about our swimmers very much. For cycling, the road cyclists have no trouble participating in both the time trials and the road races with a week in between. Omnium participants, they mostly focus on one, so they certainly have time to recover to do another event. The sheer distance is not a factor for them. Running, several athletes participate in both the 5,000 and the 10,000 track races within a week of each other, and we saw 1 marathon runner participate in another event in 2020, so a mere 5K at a sprint distance should basically just be a practice run for them on a random training day leading up to the marathon at the very end of the Olympics. So let's get to our proposal. I think you already know what it is. Let's have the first ever Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay races, 1 for men and 1 for women. And each team shall consist of 7 Olympians from 7 different events. Wow, amazing. We're pulling everyone together here to do that. So let's break it down. Each team will consist of 1 sprint triathlete specialist, and we'll define that in a little bit. Then we will have 1 pool Olympian, and then 1 open water Olympian. Then we will have 1 track cycling Olympian and 1 road or mountain biking Olympian. And lastly, we will have 1 track athlete Olympian, which again is running, or 1 road athlete Olympian. So that gives us 7 Olympians in 7 different sports. So let's start to put some rules together here. Now, team limitations. Swimmers, athletes, and cyclists must have qualified for at least 1 Olympic event in their sport. So I want to be clear, we cannot have a triathlete not make the triathlon team and then all of a sudden say that he's a swimmer and just show up and be the swimming participant. We cannot have a swimmer who did not otherwise make the Olympic team just come in and swoop in and take that spot. We're just not adding additional swimmers, runners, or cyclists here. They literally have to already be on the team and they have to also participate. So let's talk about that. If a swimmer participates in both open water and pool events, that swimmer is only eligible for the open water roster spot. Essentially, we do not want 2 open water athletes participating here. We truly want to have a mix where one person really only is in the pool all of the time and actually have to do something different and go to open water. Same thing for the athletes. We know it's very rare to have someone participate both on the track and on the road marathon, but if they do that, however, they are only eligible for the road roster spot. And lastly, we know that it doesn't happen at all, but if a cyclist happens to participate in both road and track events, that cyclist is only eligible for the road roster spot. And of course, we do have our triathletes, and that's our standard bearer here. This is a triathlon. So let's talk about triathlete qualification. Now, currently, the IOC has allotted 110 quota places for the Olympics for triathletes. And this is broken down as follows. First, so we're going to assume that the IOC is not going to grant any additional quota places for triathletes. Now, I think that they really should do that here because we want to have as many teams as possible participate in these Inter-Sport Triathlon Relays, and by increasing the quota places, we would achieve that goal. However, we're going to assume for today, for whatever reason, that they are not able to do that. So let's break down how the quota places are going to change. So first, the host, they will increase from 2 places to 3 places per gender automatically. Essentially, our goal here is to have triathlon teams with 3 members per gender, and only if you get to 3 members per gender do you get to participate in the relay. So right now we have the 2022 World Triathlon Mixed Relay Championships has 1 NOC, which is the National Olympic Committee, in this case for triathlon. So 1 NOC gets 2 places currently per gender. Essentially, the winner of that World Triathlon Mixed Relay Championship gets 2 places in the Olympics right now. We're going to increase that from 2 to 3, in line with getting them immediately halfway eligible for the Inter-Sport Relay. Then in 2023, we have the World Triathlon Mixed Relay Championship. Same thing, that's increasing from 2 quota places to 3 quota places per gender. Then the World Triathlon Mixed Relay Olympic Qualification Ranking as of March 25th, 2024 gave 6 NOCs 2 spots for the Olympics. We will again increase that from 2 to 3. Lastly, we had the 2024 World Triathlon Mixed Relay Championships. It gave it 2 NOCs instead of 1 NOC from the 2022 and 2023 World Triathlon Mixed Relay Championships. It gave 2 spots to those. We're increasing that immediately from 2 to 3. So the total of quota places given out from the mixed relay qualifications increases from 22 to 33 quota places per gender. Now, there are a couple other ways to qualify for the Olympics. The last 2 ways, so we're doing this out of order on purpose, but there are currently universality places that are allocated for several sports in the Olympics, not all of them, but many sports. So the triathlon is one of those sports where universality places exist. And for triathlon, that is currently set at 2 universality places per gender. We are not going to change that. We want to see that representation from these countries who may not otherwise have representation in the triathlon. So those places are going to remain the same. Now, there's also a thing called continental representation. So what we have now currently is that 5 quota places per gender are allocated for continental representation, 1 for each of the regions. Now note that the Americas have 1 total spot there instead of 2, not in North America and South America. So the other continents, obviously Antarctica is excluded, but the other regions, so we have 5 continental representation spots. But I think here we're going to have to drop those for now. So if those 2 universality places are used, these continental representation spots are eliminated. Sorry, we have to cut somewhere. That's where we're going to have to cut. But if any of the universality places remain, aka both spots per gender are not used, they are then allocated here to the continents with the least quota places. So let's say that Asia has the least number of representatives for the triathlon. They would get the first continental representation spot if a universality place is not used. And I do want to note that these 2 quota places are calculated last. We have another qualification method that comes before this, but for simplicity, we wanted to talk about this one before that one. So let's get to that one. We have the World Triathlon Individual Olympic Qualification Ranking. And again, these are individual rankings, not the mixed relay qualifications and not those universality places that we just talked about. And these spots are determined as of May 27th, 2024. We have to get to 110. We increased up to 33 from the mixed relays. We decreased from 2 and 5 down to just 2 for the universality places. So here, what we have left, we have to decrease from the 26 spots handed out now down to 20. So these are calculated before the universality places, but we just had to give them whatever was left, and in this case, 20 places per gender. So we have to make a few new rules here for the individual Olympic qualification rankings, and specifically 3 rules. So first, the host NOC and the NOCs that have already qualified through the mixed relay qualifications are disqualified from these individual qualifications because they already have their 3 athletes for the Olympics. So we are not giving them a 4th member as of now. Secondly, all remaining NOCs are limited to 2 quota places per gender, which is a decrease from 3. Why are we doing that? We are not giving out a 3rd spot unless they are qualifying for the Inter-Sport Relay. So let's get to that. Number 3. If an NOC attains all 4 quota places, which is 2 men, 2 women, then it shall automatically attain 1 additional quota place per gender, giving them that 3 for each gender. But there is one caveat, that is if and only if there is an available quota place for each gender. So let's talk about that last one a little bit in more detail. So again, the goal here is to have as many NOCs as possible participate in both the mixed relay and the Inter-Sport Triathlon Relays. And to do that, we need 3 person per gender NOCs. So like we just said, they don't get that spot if there's not an available quota place. So specifically, if the 4th qualifier takes the very last quota place, which is 20. Remember, we said we're decreasing to 20. So if they take that 20th spot to get to 4 members, or 2 in that specific gender, if you will, then there is no room to add an additional member. So we will not remove someone who qualified before them individually, so they are not permitted to take that last spot. We're also obviously not removing a universality place for this purpose. But we will note that in this case, that NOC will not participate in the Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay because they don't have that 3rd member, but they will still get to participate in the mixed relay because they do have 2 members to be able to participate there, if they have 2 from each gender, that is. So what do the triathlon NOCs have to do here to get everyone able to participate in all of the events? So upon obtaining 6 quota places, aka 3 per gender, then the NOC qualifies for all of the triathlon events, which we now have added the men's and the women's Inter-Sport Triathlon Relays. So each NOC shall select exactly 2 individuals per gender to participate in the individual triathlons. So right now you can have 3 participants in the individual triathlons, but now we're reducing that. You only get exactly 2. Then the 3rd member of the triathlon team, that person will be designated as the sprint triathlon specialist and shall participate in the Inter-Sport Relay. So that's their whole purpose there. So these events, we're going to have 3 members on the triathlon team, 2 will participate in the individual triathlon, 1 will participate in the Inter-Sport Relay. Lastly, any 2 of the 3 individuals on the triathlon team per gender will be eligible for the mixed relay. and this may be changed at any time prior to the start of the mixed relay race. Remember, we had the mixed relay last on the schedule 4 or 5 days after the individual triathlon, so in case there's an injury, we can substitute the third person into the second person spot on the mixed relay. Now, the recommendation is not a requirement, but a recommendation that the NOC gives priority to its top 2 individuals per gender to participate in the mixed relay. Now, as for the sprint triathlon specialist, well, let's have an example here. Let's say your NOC has the 10th best triathlete, the 15th best triathlete, and the 20th best triathlete in the world that have all qualified for the Olympics. Well, you know that there will be at least 40 to 55, I assume it'll be less than 55 now, that's the current number that are allowed to participate in the individual triathlons, but since we're removing some spots to go to this relay, I think it'll be a little less than 55, which I don't think anyone's going to complain too hard about. Still plenty of spots, a lot of elbow bumping that's still able to go on in that case. So the IOC says it's pretty unlikely that any of these 3 athletes are actually going to get a medal for second or third. So maybe we should change this a little bit. If the person that's ranked 10th in the world is fine with doing it and is happy to do it, maybe he or she will participate in the Inter-Sport Relay. Now, I think we would give them first choice in whether they would want to do the Inter-Sport Relay or stick with the individual relay. So again, I think that's up to the NOC and the athletes themselves. Who knows? We'll see how that shakes out. But either way, you have 3 athletes on your roster. Put them how you will to have the best results for your country. So for the qualification purposes for the Inter-Sport Relay, to field a team in either Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay, an NOC must have 3 Olympic triathletes of that gender and 1 Olympian in each of the 6 described sports. Again, you must have qualified and be scheduled to participate in an Olympic event in that sport to qualify for one of those 6 other sports, and then also participate in the Inter-Sport Relay. There is no separate qualification for this event. Now, that's totally different from mostly any other sport here, but because everything is just coming together for this grand event at the Olympics, there is no separate qualification due to how we have everything set up. These other Olympians have to qualify in their own sports. They don't also have to qualify for the Olympics in the Inter-Sport Relay. They also don't have to have separate preliminary events that takes them out of their normal schedule to qualify for the Inter-Sport Relay. No, you just go straight to the Olympics. It's a one-shot opportunity, and you either win a gold or a silver or a bronze, or you don't. It's one shot. And of course, then it is up to the NOC to select and train each athlete for this special event. How much training time is going to get diverted from their standard events to participate in this? There's obviously going to be some relays and tags. They've got to know how it's going to work out. You might be going from a pool to open water. You might be going from a track to a road. So we need to give them a little bit of time to train up on that. So that's up to the NOC how they want to do that. And if they really want to succeed in this event, they need to set that aside and properly hammer that out. So as for the Inter-Triathlon Relay itself, how is it going to work? Well, what we're going to do is use the sprint triathlon lanes. And there will be 3 sprint triathlon laps per race. Now let's define a lap. A lap is a sprint triathlon, which contains a swim, a bike, and a run. Now the sprint triathlon lanes, let's talk about those yet again. The swim is 750 meters, the bike is 20 kilometers, and the run is 5 kilometers. So in laps 1 and 2, the 6 non-triathletes shall each complete a leg in their sport with a standard relay tag in designated zones marking the beginning and the end of each leg. Now we do have an alternate to a standard tag that we'll talk about here shortly, but for now, essentially the 6 non-triathletes will be the first 6 participants. They will go in laps 1 and 2, and then in lap 3, the sprint triathlete specialist shall complete the full third lap to wrap it up and get a winner. So what's the best way to talk about this? It's a new concept. Let's go through this with a full example. So here is our track from the mixed relay from the 2020 Tokyo Summer Olympics. Now again, we're not running this exact race. This is a lot shorter than what we would run. Remember, the mixed relay is very short compared to any other triathlon. So this will expand and be the length of a sprint triathlon. But for our purposes, that doesn't matter a whole lot. So let's break that down a little bit one by one here. You do see the light blue and dark blue for the swimming laps. Then we see the orange for the cycling laps. And then we see the red for the running laps. And also note that there is a transition area as well that is outlined. It is a white area outlined in blue apparently. So that's what we have here. The transition area will be key for our purposes when we talk about it. So let's break down what happened at the 2020 mixed relay and turn that into our Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay. So you start with a swim in a triathlon, and no change here. We will start with a swim. So you have this raised area in the water where you start with a dive off of this raised podium essentially to jump into the water to get the race started. Here's the faraway view, and then we take it into a zoom view. Everyone is just about ready to jump in the water. All their spots are numbered. We would probably have about the same number of teams here for the Inter-Sport Relay as we would have in the mixed relay, so that looks pretty good. So they jump into the water, they start, they run their lap, and we now go here. They're wrapping up their lap here. So these are the first swimmers from the mixed relay. They are ending their swim and getting on back onto the blue podium, I guess we'll call it. I don't know what it's officially called, but they will get out of the water onto the land, and then they will start to make their run. You can see what it looked like here for Tokyo. All of this blue area where they get out of the water, they make a run, they make one right-hand turn, and then get to the transition area where they have their transition baskets and their bikes. So the swimmer has just completed their swim. They've gotten onto that blue platform and they make this run. They make a right-hand turn before they get into the transition area where the bikes are. So option one, we can have a tag area right here. Now you can see that there are bikes on both sides of the transition area. Half of the teams have bikes on the near side of the screen and half have them on the far side of the screen. So what we can do here is have kind of a side out area, probably put a horizontal line here and have a tag area in order of where their bikes are placed, so it's a pretty equal run to their bikes. So we can have a traditional tag happen in this area. The swimmer simply tags the cyclist in this area right here. Then once they're tagged, the cyclist then runs to the bike area. So that is option one. Let's take a faraway look here. This is the transition area here where the bikes are. Again, there's a near side section and a far side section, so we can make the tags that way. So let's zoom this in to our specific runners. See our first runner here. Now again, this would be a cyclist if we do it under option one. This would still be the swimmer if we do option two. So let's take a zoomed in look here at this area. You can see there's a bike, there's a helmet, there is the transition basket where you place your goggles or your swimming cap into them. Then the swimmer's shoes are sitting right beside the bike. And then we also have that sign up above. Let's look at the next picture here that zooms in on that. You see this is Great Britain, which is team 4, and this is the first leg, so this is Triathlete A in our specific case. So let's talk about option 2 for the tag. What I kind of prefer here, because these athletes are not particularly well versed at the transitions from swim to cycle and then cycle to run, we can kind of eliminate that segment if we do option 2. So we see this sign here for a Great Britain. what they can do, instead of a traditional tag, we can have them hit that sign essentially. Maybe it can be lit up with some electric buzzer. They can hit a buzzer, hit the sign, anything, make a sound, make a light, and we know at that point, then the cyclist can take over for the swimmer, which keeps the transition very easily. You can see beyond the Team 5's bike section that there is a barrier, and the same thing is on the other side. So if the swimmer hits the sign, then at that point, the cyclist jumps over that barrier and into the field of play in the transition area. They grab their bike and helmet, and they are just able to take off right there. Seems pretty simple, and even a little bit more fun with hitting the box instead of just a standard tag with a hand. So after we do either option 1 or option 2, it doesn't really matter. You can see that we have the standard green transition line there, and we have a person with a flag who keeps track of any fouls committed by each of the triathletes. So here, that green line, let's keep that in place for our next go round when we have our next transition. But right now we have all the cyclists. They're able to jump on the bike after the green line and get going on their route. You can see them here, they're just on the road now. They're completing their cycling laps. So now they're coming to the end of their segment. You can see that they're on the blue platform the same way as it was for the swimming segment, but this is signifying the end of their lap. And they're coming in here, and now you can see this red line we briefly talked about earlier, but it's important for the triathlon. You have to be off of your bike before the red line, or again, you can get a penalty. You can see that person there with the red flag ready to indicate any fouls. So here in laps 1 and 2, we will have another exchange at this point. So how do we want to do it here? I think there are 2 ways, and it'll be the reverse. So the cyclist has to get off of their bike at the red line, and they go into the transition area. You can see them here running with their bike now that they have gone past the red line, and they are going into the transition area to drop off their bikes. So in this specific shot, you can see the triathlete changing into their running shoes instead of their biking shoes. So what we would have here in option 1, which is the reverse of the first exchange, here we can do the same thing, hit the box just as we did before, and as soon as the cyclist hits the box, then the runner jumps over the barricade, and then they just take off. So we could do it that way. I think that would, again, work pretty easily, makes a very simple transition. Or we can keep it a little bit more complicated, where you can see the cyclist takes off here with running shoes, which they admittedly would not change into running shoes. They would just rack their bike in this spot and take off running to the green line that we talked about earlier, the green line. Now, the green line is not as important for our purposes here. There's no foul to have for running, but just beyond that green line, you can see for a triathlon, we have a water station here where the athletes often grab some water as they are just starting their running segment. But since this is instead a relay, we would not have a running station here just beyond the green line. Instead, this would be the tagging station that we would have, and it would just be a standard tag. We would have it set up the same way we did in option 1 for the first tag, that those on the near side of the screen would all be on one side, those on the far side of the screen would be on the other side, and you simply tag in that designated zone, and you just take off as soon as you make the tag for the runner. And so that's a pretty easy option. So I think we either do it both ways with this tag area in these exchanges, or we simply have hitting the boxes on top of the bike rack and transition area. So those are our 2 options there. I like either of them. Whichever one the triathlon experts like better, I think will work perfectly fine. So, but now we're into the running leg of the first lap. And so here we just see the runners, they're taking off, they're on the road. Now here in this next shot, they are wrapping up their leg here, and you can see that they go past that red line. But notice that they are not going into the bike transition area. Instead, remember that barricade we talked about. Now that barricade doubles here as a new area for where the runners have to run to. So let's see them run down this lane right here that is set up for them. Look at that. There they are in this lane nearer to the screen, and the way that you make the tag here is the exact same way you actually make the tag for a mixed relay. There's no real reason to change that here. So you can see that here's the tag area. All of the swimmers are just lined up to take over here. At this spot, you simply have to have the runner get to that line that you can see on the floor. Anywhere after that, in that tag zone, between those two lines on the ground, they can make that tag and the swimmer takes off once the tag is made. That looks pretty easy to me. That doesn't really need to be changed. So as soon as you get the tag, you can see the swimmers take off to begin lap 2, and they make that turn, and they jump into the water here with a big jump off of the platform. Note that this is a slightly different area than there was for the start of the race. So it's a slightly different lap that you saw. We had the light blue and the dark blue, slightly different laps for the swimmers, but laps 2 and 3 will be the same way. So there you have it. So that is how it's going to work. The same thing would repeat for all of lap 2, make those same exchanges, and then for lap 3, we will just have the triathlete take that standard tag from run to swim. They will jump in the water and then do all 3 legs of that lap, aka complete a sprint triathlon to end the race. So you may say that is a pretty cool concept, but how are you ever going to fit that into the Olympics? There are already so many events. And yeah, you're right, we looked at that composite schedule earlier, so let's bring that up here. Let's find a way to fit this Inter-Sport Relay into the schedule. And so here it is. So after we look at all of this, the best thing that we can do, you can see that the end of the schedule is really pretty full with the potential participants in the relay. So it's best for us to try to put this at the very beginning of the Olympics. So really the ones we're worried about is the beginning of the Olympic schedule. So we have emboldened and italicized those events that we're a little worried about here. So you can see that the cycling events that happen on the 27th, 28th, and 29th, which are the road time trials and the mountain biking events, those are an issue for us. It would be really hard for someone who participates in the time trial to also participate in the Inter-Sport Relay. And since the relay is a lot shorter than the road race and is even shorter than the time trial, it would probably be better for us to have the time trial participants than the road race participants. They will of course be eligible, but we really should have the time trial folks, since those ones are focusing on higher speeds for a shorter amount of time as compared to the full road race where you really have to worry about the endurance of over 250 kilometers to complete. So that's our issue for cycling. Again, I don't think the mountain bikers are going to be involved, but we have them listed here. So there's just no good way for us to fit in this relay race without moving our road races. Therefore, the road time trials is going to get bumped back an entire week from the 27th to August 3rd. And the mountain bike races will then go from the 28th and 29th to the 4th and the 5th. But that, of course, also makes us have to change the road race schedule as well. And we will push those back an entire week from the 3rd and 4th to the 10th and 11th. Now that does give us one second problem that we're going to have to deal with. The road marathon for the running folks will also overlap with the road race for cycling. And as you can imagine, they want to use the best roads for these two events, and that means they're probably going to overlap on the courses a little bit. So Unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do with that, but we will just have to say you're going to have to choose some different roads, have an alternate route. It won't be that big of a difference. I'm sure there's plenty of good routes, especially in France. We are going from Paris to Versailles in the road marathon for running. We do indeed also go from Paris through Versailles and then continue southwest for the cycling road race. So right now it looks like we probably have some overlap, but they're just going to have to find a way to make them not overlap. Really shouldn't be a big deal, but a slight inconvenience for these folks going forward to have to coordinate a little bit. Now for swimming, we do have a little bit of concern with the 800 meters and the 1500 meters being at the beginning of the swimming schedule. Now again, it seems that the swimmers can really recover very quickly and participate in several events, so I'm less concerned about them here. But it is a little bit of a difference to go from the pool to open water, so we'll try to give them as much room as possible to have a little bit of break before they can switch back to the pool. So where do we put this relay? So our proposal here is to have them on the day of the opening ceremony and the day before the opening ceremony. Now you say the opening ceremonies never have any events on the same day. So why are you breaking tradition here? Well, I think it's safe to say that what we want to have here is just another way to show world unity and teamwork. Any of the principles and values that are held dear by the Olympics really come into play here for an inter-sport relay. You're really bringing a lot of people together from different areas and putting them together in one group, one team, all participating together and then against each other from these other countries. So this is the perfect event, really, to be tied to the opening ceremonies, where you literally have every athlete from every country that participates all in the Olympic Stadium at the same time. So that's kind of what we're having as a microcosm for the Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay, bringing all of these athletes together in one race. So if there is any event that should be on the same day as the opening ceremonies, it's this one. It's special, it's unique, it brings everybody together. Let's make that the morning of the opening ceremonies. And then as an ultimate bonus, what we're going to do here, we will have medal ceremonies at the opening ceremony, which obviously we don't have right now because the medals are not given out until after the opening ceremonies. So you will literally be the most famous people in the world if you get a medal in the Inter-Sport Triathlon Relays. You will get your national anthem played and you will receive your gold medal if you win the Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay at the opening ceremonies, where there are the most people from the most countries watching this event. I don't think you could ask for much more. There is no greater incentive to participate in the Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay than having that opportunity to be on that podium during opening ceremonies. That's really special. It's really unique, something different, just a great way to kick off the Olympics. So if we do that, we have one the day before, the one the day of the opening ceremonies, and then both of your winners get their gold medals at the opening ceremonies. Now, however, admittedly, if you want to keep that tradition of not having it on the day of the opening ceremony, fine. Right now, we have events taking place beginning on the 24th and 25th. We simply push it back one day. We have the men's relay on the 24th. We have the women's relay on the 25th. Easy. Still, the medal ceremonies then take place at the opening ceremonies. Amazing. Amazing. Hold those off until the opening ceremonies. You receive those medals there. So if ever there were a way to bring the best athletes from a bunch of sports together in one spot and get the most eyes on it, this is the way to do it. You will have all of your track and field fans watching the Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay. You will have all of your swimming fans watching the Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay. You will have all of your cycling fans watching the Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay. Amazing. So many people will want to tune into this because your best athletes will be participating in the Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay. So let's look at our two dream teams here from the 2020 Olympics. Again, I don't want to take a shot at this for 2024, so we're going to do this in arrears. So here are our 2020 Inter-Sport Triathlon Relay participants. First, for the men's side, our triathlete, Matthew McElroy. He was ranked 20th individually in the World Triathlon Rankings on June 13th, 2021. But guess what? He did not get to participate in the Olympics because Team USA only had 2 quota places. But because we had 2 quota places for men and 2 quota places for women under this new standard, we would automatically get a third for both the men and the women, and then we would have a third male triathlete make the Olympics. So congratulations, Matthew, you have now made the Olympics. So I'm not going to say that the other 2 gentlemen that actually participated in the men's individual triathlon would change from that event. For now, we're giving Matthew this spot. So congratulations, Matthew, you are an Olympian. Unfortunately, only theoretically, but I hope it's a little bit of consolation. So let's talk about our swimmers. We go to the pool. Even though this is only 750 meters, I went with the 1500 meter representatives for both, as it's a little bit of a difference. I think there's a little bit more effort here for the 1500, but we also had amazing 1500 meter freestyle swimmers, so that made it easy. Robert Fink, we had win the gold medal for Team USA. He is our 1 gold medalist on this team. And then on the open water marathon, we had Jordan Wilimovsky. He finished 10th in that event. For the cycling events, Omnium, we had Gavin Hoover. He finished 8th. And for the road time trial, Brandon McNulty finished 24th. And then for running, for the 5,000, we had Paul Chalimo. He won the bronze medal, so that gives us 2 medalists on this team. And in the marathon, we had Galen Rupp. He finished 8th. And then on the women's side, our triathlete is Taylor Knibb. She was our 3rd representative for the Olympics. So for these purposes, I'm simply moving her over to this spot, even though either the other 2 women, they would certainly be eligible if they wanted that spot instead. For the 1500 meter freestyle, probably our most famous of all of the participants, Katie Ledecky, our true legend here. She, of course, won the gold in the 1500, so she is on this team. And then the open water marathon, we have Haley Anderson. She finished 6th. Moving on to cycling, we had for the Omnium, Jennifer Valente. She won the gold as well, so we have 2 gold medalists here on this team. And then in the road time trial, we have Ander Nebben. She finished a very respectable 5th place. Then for running, the 5,000 meter representative, Carissa Schweitzer, she finished 11th in that event. And then in the marathon, Molly Seidel, she won the bronze. So that gives us 3 medalists on this women's team. So there you have it, Zoo Crew. We have created a new relay for the Olympic Games, and we're putting it in a prime spot so the whole world will be watching it and we can really celebrate the most athletes from all of these amazing sports, and it will just be a great way to kick off the Summer Olympics. So until next time, when we complete part 4 of our Olympic series, this has been the SportsZu. So you said Madison likes tag teams. Do you think I can get her number? 1, are you breaking up with Carter and Chance now? And 2, it's a cycling event, not a person.